A large number of people who reach out to me are actually the friends, partners, or family of someone struggling with bipolar disorder. Many have scoured the internet looking for solutions to a seemingly impossible situation. I know there's a lot of information out there on what bipolar disorder is, but not so much on what to do about it. Polar Warriors is all about what to do about it. So today I'd like to talk about 10 ways you might be able to help a loved one with bipolar disorder. Keep in mind that timing is so important. If the person you care about is too symptomatic, you might have to wait and try these techniques again at a later time. For more videos like this one, check out our playlist dedicated to friends and family. All right, so let's get started. Number 1. Be a mindful conductor of activities. Before I was diagnosed, my friends used to love my episodes of euphoric hypomania. It was probably the only time they saw me. We'd go from one place to another, spending money, laughing, blasting music, just being high on life. I mean, who would see a problem with that, right? What none of us realized was that we were actually feeding the mania. We were increasing the duration and severity of my mood swings in the long run. It would almost be like unknowingly handing an alcoholic a beer. If I could go back in time, I would encourage my friends to be strategic about what activities they suggest when I'm hypomanic. For example, instead of going shopping or drinking, I'd have them suggest going to see a movie. Instead of going through McDonald's, I'd have my friends suggest eating somewhere nutritious. Now, this isn't about controlling someone who's having a bipolar episode. We all know that's not possible. This is about using some strategic judgment when suggesting activities if you know your loved one is symptomatic. Tip number 2. Don't be afraid to set some boundaries and be very clear about the consequences if the boundaries aren't respected. Those of us with bipolar disorder are the hardest on our partners and family. I mention that a lot because it's so true. I've said things to my family when I wasn't well that I would never say to a coworker. I've done things to hurt my partner that I would never do to a friend. Without boundaries, it's easy for bad behavior to escalate during episodes until we start losing jobs, relationships, getting arrested, or even worse because of it. Setting boundaries isn't easy by any means, but it can literally be life-changing or life-saving. If you do set a boundary, it is crucial that you stick with it, no matter what. Going back on a boundary not only deteriorates trust, but it also makes it harder to set boundaries in the future. If you need help with setting boundaries, please work with a coach or a counselor. I believe they are absolutely necessary for a healthy relationship. Moving on to number 3, come up with a simple, clear plan for the bad times. When you're feeling that your loved one is more or less stable, ask them things like, what should I say if I notice you're talking too fast? Or what kind of text message helps you the most when you're feeling down? Things like that. Also, make sure to ask what doesn't help. Some people don't like being touched at all when they're depressed, while others could really use a hug. It's totally different for everyone, which is why it's so important to ask. I also recommend coming up with some words or phrases you can use in public settings. For example, I might not want to tell my partner I'm having a psychotic break next to someone in the grocery store. The stranger's reaction could contribute to my stress. Instead, I can say, my BP is in the red zone and I need to go sit in the car right away. A lot of couples counselors talk about love language in the way that couples communicate. It's really similar with mental health. We have to cultivate our own psych language when approaching mental health to maximize successful communication. Number 4, understand and take advantage of how valuable your position is. People around me can often notice symptoms way before I do, especially if they've been educated on what to look for. Part of the illness is not being able to tell when I'm symptomatic. My partner, family, and closest friends have helped me on so many occasions to point out the signs of an episode starting. This allowed me to take preventative measures that reduced the severity and duration of the episodes. It's been a team effort all the way though. If my loved ones didn't educate themselves on what to look for, this wouldn't work. If I wasn't respectful and responsive to their feedback, it wouldn't work. If we didn't have a crisis plan or a warning system in place, things could get bad. It's taken time for me to cultivate a support system like this. You can start by simply sharing a Polar Warrior video with the people closest to you. Number 5, if you do an online search for how to help someone with bipolar disorder, there's one recurring tip that comes up in just about every single article, probably because of how important it is. This would be to learn as much as you can about the illness. There are some great introductory books, videos, and articles out there, but these have to be approached with realistic expectations. I know how cliche and almost patronizing it sounds to those of you who've read 10 books and still feel helpless when it comes to helping your loved one. That being said, I'd like to offer a little different spin on this one. Something I've learned along my journey is that we all have our own brand of bipolar disorder. The only constant is that we go up and down. Aside from that, we all have different triggers, different ways of reacting to life, different thresholds for suffering, different duration of episodes, and we react to treatment differently. It helped me so much to learn words like mania, depression, mixed episodes, psychosis, etc. from books. It was similar to learning how to swim from reading a book. You can grasp the concept or essence of it, but eventually you have to get into the water. Learning about bipolar disorder will at least give you the foundation to understand what's happening when you get in the water, aka when somebody's having an episode. Tip number 6. One of the easiest, most effective ways to help someone with bipolar disorder is to document their moods. If your loved one is open to it, ask them if you can help track their moods with a phone app, a calendar on the wall, or a journal. Don't do it unless you have their permission. Make sure the person knows that you're documenting their mood. It can literally be as simple as a smiley or frowny face on a calendar if you'd like. I suggest keeping it simple and easy. A doctor doesn't have time to read a 100-page journal. Having a graph or a chart that lays it all out is best. There's a phone app called eMoods that I really like to use personally. It's super easy to track moods, and it can provide summary charts that you can print out for a doctor to review. This kind of data is invaluable to medical professionals. It can help show the duration, frequency, and even severity of episodes so they can make appropriate treatment changes. All right, moving on to number 7. Respectfully know your place and don't try to play doctor. If you had a friend with a brain tumor, you wouldn't offer to perform the surgery yourself, would you? Bipolar disorder is a life-threatening, extremely serious mental illness. Psychiatrists go to school for the better half of a decade to be able to help people with mental illness. Don't take this on yourself. Know your limits for the sake of getting your loved one the best care. Bipolar disorder requires specialty care. Most general practitioners aren't even equipped to deal with it. They refer you to a specialist. If your loved one is having a total crisis and you're not professionally trained to deal with it, it's literally like handing a thirsty person an empty cup. The good intention is there, but it creates an impasse that just leaves everyone frustrated. It also might prevent your loved one from getting the care they really need. It would be ideal to have a predetermined plan for times of crisis. Have a list of phone numbers ready, like doctors, crisis lines, and even poison control in case of an overdose. Maybe come up with a list of symptoms that everyone agrees will necessitate a crisis call. A little bit of planning can mean the difference between life and death. Speaking of life and death, number 8 would be to have a plan in place in case you have to call the police. They deal with so much drug-induced psychosis that they'll often pull a gun and assume your loved one is a danger. We see this on the news all the time. Having someone threaten you with deadly force when you're at your absolute worst can cause nasty PTSD. I don't mean to sound so cynical, but calling the police should be your very last resort. If police show up without being called, protect yourself. Get a camera rolling right away. If they know that they're being filmed, they tend to be on better behavior. Have an emergency card or a one-page document you can hand them right away that explains your loved one's diagnosis, symptoms, in writing. You can buy cards like this or even medical alert bracelets on Amazon. Put in bold, all caps, that your loved one is not violent or a danger to others if that's the case. Get the name of the officer you gave the emergency info to. If you must call the police, request that they show up with a mental health worker. Many departments now have someone on call that actually is trained to handle a crisis situation. Little things like this could mean the difference between life and death by cop. Moving on to number 9. It's crucially important to take care of yourself, and I know this is way easier said than done, especially if the person you love is suffering. It's easy to neglect your own needs when you're supporting someone with bipolar disorder. This causes caretaker burnout, which doesn't help anyone. One of the first questions I ask caretakers when I talk to them is if they have their own counselor or support group. Don't go at this alone. It can be painful, isolating, and build up resentment if you don't have adequate emotional support. If your loved one needs more help than you can provide, please ask for help from others. Check out NAMI, Bipolar Hope Magazine, bipolar spouse support groups on Facebook, or you can even join Polar Warriors on Patreon and connect with me. So many people I talk to don't have their own counselor because they assume counseling is just for people with issues. That is so far from the truth. Having a counselor is like having a very wise friend to talk to about anything. My friends aren't equipped to always give the best advice when I'm having a relationship or life crisis. It's also really hard on my friends to lay heavy stuff on them all the time. Having a counselor takes the burden off of my close friends so they aren't the only people I lean on. We have made it to number 10. This would be to take advantage of the functioning times. Sometimes my friends don't hear from me for several weeks or even months. When I'm finally feeling good enough to hang out again, they want to go see a movie, go bowling, skiing, whatever. It's almost as if we just wanted to forget the bad times and finally enjoy our time together again. Unfortunately, bipolar is cyclic, so the bad times are inevitably going to happen again. If your loved one is coming out of an episode and feeling good enough to socialize, try to encourage them to make a doctor's appointment. Try some group therapy, in person or online, or move forward with their treatment. Maybe even offer to go to a meeting with them. When I was newly diagnosed, I went through this cycle of getting sick and swearing that I'll finally do something about my depression. When I'm depressed, I'll say things like, "I need help, I don't want to keep doing this, I'm finally ready." Then, when the depression fades, the sense of urgency to do something about it fades with it. I'd much rather go to the movies with friends than attend a support group when I'm feeling good, but that doesn't solve anything. I was going in circles. That being said, if your loved one is in a good functioning space, take full advantage of that time by encouraging them to move forward with their care. Remember to be patient with them if they don't see the urgency that you do. Part of the illness is not being able to tell that we're sick. I am a very stubborn person, so it took me a few rides on the merry-go-round before I started to change some things. We've made it through 10 different ways you can help someone struggling with bipolar disorder. Before I sign off, I want to mention one last thing. I know it's hard to watch someone you care about suffer and not be able to fix it. My family and friends watched me destroy relationship after job after opportunity. It was like watching a car accident in slow motion and not being able to stop it. Although the suffering appears unnecessary, it was actually a very important part of my journey. I had to lose enough jobs, relationships, and opportunities to finally take my illness seriously. I literally had to hit the proverbial rock bottom to get to where I am. I feel horrible about the people I hurt along the way, but I'm also incredibly grateful for them. If it weren't for the bosses and partners that said no more, I wouldn't have been motivated to change and this channel wouldn't exist. Think about that. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. If you have any questions or want to contact me directly, there's a link in the video description. Take extra good care this week, and I'll be back here soon with more Polar Warrior videos. Stay well.